GenFriends. I'm your host, Cheri Hudson Passey from Carolina Girl Genealogy. And with me tonight is a special guest and fabulous panel members. We've got Dan Earl, the Family History Guy. Hi, Dan.
Hello.
Good to see you. We've got Mary Kircher Roddy from MKR Genealogy. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Cheri. Hi, everybody.
I'm glad you're here. And we've got Laura Hedgecock from Treasure Chest of Memories. Hi, Laura.
Hi.
I'm glad you're here too. Well, we brought in a special guest tonight. If any of you happened to watch the SLAM event that was during the NGS conference, we watched her give her little presentation on that. Thought she'd be wonderful to come in. So welcome everybody, Mary Kate Gliedt. She is the, make sure I get this correctly, she's the Manager of Genealogy at the St. Louis Public Library, which is just fabulous. She grew up in St. Louis and then went to New York to get her master's. And this is really cool. She worked in immigration history. Isn't that cool? And she also worked in a museum education before she came back to St. Louis, where she's now working for the library. Well, and people, if I laugh in the middle of this, is because these guys put jokes and stuff in the chat. And I see it and I start laughing. So I apologize for the troublemakers in this group. Mary Kate, we're so glad that you're here.
I'm happy to be here. This is awesome.
Explain for people that maybe didn't watch, if you can, what the SLAM was. What is SLAM? Is societies, libraries, archives, and museums.
Yeah.
SLAM.
I was trying to remember too. I was just the L part. But so it was an event where all of those SLAM things were invited to kind of submit their cool things they were doing. I think it was framed as innovations in genealogy or projects they had done.
I like the cool things.
That's what it felt like to me when I was reading. It's kind of any cool thing you were working on.
Yeah.
And so it was cool just to see what was included. And then it was also very cool, of course, to make the presentation I got to make as part of it about the work that I've been doing at the library on inclusion.
Right. Well, you started out with a really cool chart, and that chart came out of wanting the inclusion. So can you tell us about your chart?
Yeah, so in my mind, it's called a family wheel. It is not the best name. Doesn't roll off the tongue, but it works.
You should have a contest. Have a contest.
Oh, that's a good idea. Now our library just reopened to the public about a month ago. So now that people are coming in more, we can totally do that. But it basically looks like, if you can envision the logo for Target, and just keep moving it bigger and bigger, that's what it looks like. And in the middle, you start with yourself like you would on any other family diagram. And each ring of that target or that wheel represents the next generation. You just keep layering it outward. And I liked this because the family tree felt really static to me when I was looking at how the work we're doing at the library could be more inclusive to folks. There are plenty of families who don't have a two-parent house, who don't have two opposite gender parents, who don't know who their parents are because of adoption or other things, have multiple people they would call parents. And so when you run into those challenges, my grandfather is adopted. And so whenever I could only go so far with the gene part of genealogy. And so it made sense to me to kind of include as many people in that tree as I could. And so that's kind of where I started thinking about what the choices would be for something other than a family tree.
You don't happen to, and I don't want to put you on the spot, you don't happen to have a picture of it that you could share the screen?
Oh, you know what? I can find it quickly.
That would be fabulous. And if possible, and it might not be because of copyright, if you want to give us a picture of it, we'll put it on the blog post. So
sure. I can
see, but if you'd rather not, I understand the whole copyright thing. And
no worries. I can grab it. Let's see.
I liked it when I saw it because
let me pop on share my screen.
Yeah, you should be able to just right there on the bottom share your screen. While you're looking for it, I liked it because I can add my step grandfather on here now, and it won't have to be a separate thing. It's right there with everybody else.
Yeah. So can you see my screen there now?
Yes.
Fantastic. So this is kind of what I was just describing. Sorry?
I can't see her screen. Can you guys see it?
I
see it.
can.
I can see it.
Okay, cool.
So it's kind of like the target. Keep thinking about target. It's not like the target, but it does have lines through the middle. So you're able to kind of separate those maternal and paternal lines as you need to. And this is the one that I think would kind of most closely have the same information as a family tree would, where it's two parents who have two parents themselves and kind of can continue to move outward if I wanted to add more rings. But I can, let's see if I can find the one that I've used for the presentation, which I probably can't, so let's back up. You can divide those sections again and again and again. Should you have a step parent? Should you have an adoptive set of parents and a biological set of parents? Should you have step siblings? Should you have great grandparents that you want to include, or if any of these people chose to get remarried after a divorce or after a widow, you know, something to that effect. Which those kinds of things happen a lot in family history, and there isn't a simple way to record those names. And so this diagram to me felt more intuitive.
I like that. Go ahead, Mary. Go
I
ahead.
have a question about
Yeah.
it. So I totally get the generational thing going out, but you mentioned step siblings or half siblings. How do you fit siblings on something like this? That's the part I don't get.
I did play with siblings a lot when I was kind of making prototypes for this, and there wasn't a super good way to do it. And I should preface that I am an only child, so this is another thing that does not resonate with me. But I think there's ways to make it work. I think it would be kind of interesting to doctor this with more smaller bubbles, because if you're in the same generation, like right here, you could put your siblings in the center bubble with you. You could put aunts and uncles in this ring with your parents as well. And you could trace them outward if you wanted to. I think it would almost merit their own diagram, which is another option to kind of create many, many wheels for all these different lines, because it does make much more visual sense to just trace straight up or straight down on this diagram. But I think the thing I like about this the best is that it feels to me more flexible. So if your brain works in this way, it works for you pretty well, and you can just kind of put information up there as you learn it. There's more space than just the name and a date. You know, you could put in where they went to school. You could write their siblings' names in there if you wanted to, just to record them. You could put the place of birth or the place of death or where they're interred or any of those things that don't have a place in a family tree and turn up in some other document on your hard drive that you forget where you saved it, and then all of a sudden it's lost to you. So I like that it feels kind of like a graphic organizer to me. Like all my thoughts can end up here.
Yeah.
I liked your example during the slam where you're talking about like so the middle circle is the person, but then the second circle is where then the blended family could go so I do like the fact that you could have different genders. I started even thinking about a member of my family, and she was adopted by a single parent. And she knows and doesn't right now want to know about her biological parents, but she's curious about her ethnicity. So you could take this, and on the top side over her mother, she could do the adoptive family tree kind of bit. And on the bottom could do an ethnicity.
For sure.
And so I'm always struggling on how
idea.
I'm always struggling. I had an opportunity to do family history at the local elementary school where there's a lot of children of immigrants. And I couldn't figure out how to do it without leaving anybody out, because I thought some of these kids are going to like, oh, my ancestors were on the Mayflower, and others are going to say, I'm not sure who dad is. So, and then my family's all in India, or my family's all here. So I couldn't so I love the way that you've come up with something so flexible,
Right.
that people could make it work for whatever, learning opportunity presented itself.
Yeah, making it flexible and making it easy were huge for me, because I used to do, like we said earlier, education. So I've worked with kids a lot, and nothing makes them turn their nose up than something that sounds hard or has long directions or that they can't maybe fully complete. And so I wanted to make it easy. And also for anyone trying to teach, you know, you don't want to have to bring 16 kinds of family tree documents if you can make it work with one. And like you say, this is pretty flexible. It isn't perfect, but it is certainly, it's flexible and it's workable. And because it is flexible, whatever makes sense in your head can probably make sense here.
Yeah, I love that it's flexible.
Yeah, so
you can make it your own, however you want it. It doesn't have to fit those forms. You know, you're given those forms and you've got to fill in the blanks. This you create it any way you want and split those sections up any way you want.
It's like a lot of fan charts, and that's however many fan charts would make sense. You put them together in a circle, really.
Yeah, almost exactly that. Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. Really, really nice. You know, you had
but in my mind, I just was going to say, in my mind, there were two other big messages you had. I don't know if you meant to. That I heard.
We can see
myself was one that just because we've always done something one way doesn't mean we should continue. And that's hard in genealogy when it has been done one way for so long. And the other thing is adapting it for inclusiveness.
Oh, yes.
So
yeah, I will say.
So I love that you did that while you presented people with a tool instead of just standing up and saying, you people need to do something different, but you gave them a tool and you gave them like a spark of inspiration.
Which is the best way to start anything. You know, I'm not going to tell you everything you've ever done is wrong and give you no solution. But my goal was also not to incite a revolution. That was not the intent. But just to sort of present, particularly from a public library standpoint, and as I mentioned in the presentation, our genealogy department is out of our central library. So it's in the middle of our downtown, which comes with an incredibly varied customer base. And we're also in a pretty heavy tourist district. So we're not too far from like the St. Louis Arch. We're not far from where you play the sports in St. Louis. And so we get all kinds of people through the door because they live here or because they don't. And seeing what our resources are, seeing what's available is, you know, it's showing off to everybody. And so it mattered to me from a public library standpoint that it be as simple and as inclusive as possible to make this process seem not daunting, because you walk into a room that's full of genealogy books and it can look very daunting when we have a nice, really big, really bright room, but it's full of books. And, you know, thinking about this is all for this one subject, you know, that could be really, really heavy and really daunting. And so making it seem simple and enterable and able to be done by anybody was really important to me.
Now you started this program did you create this before COVID closed you, or had you been working on it? I know, didn't you say you were giving these out to people? You had those kits you were making?
Yeah, so I've only been working at the library since COVID. So that's been a fun hurdle, as it has been for everybody, I'm sure. But one of the things that our entire system was doing, I cannot take the credit for this, was making what they called take and makes. So our children's department was sending out craft supplies and little card games, and our science department was sending out plant seeds and succulent pots, and all kinds of stuff was happening. We had lots of stuff before the election for voting. So we had all kinds of stuff that people could come and pick up at the curbside. And because we were doing that, it seemed kind of obvious to me that we're all stuck at home. We're all Zooming everybody we know anyway. We're getting ready for Zoom Thanksgiving or whatever holiday we're going to have. You know, why not just make a genealogy one and see how it goes? And people really responded to it. I had to refill them a couple times. And, you know, I say, you know, what the other departments were doing, and I was mostly just handing out packets. You know, it was mostly just packets of paper with a pen so you could get started right away, writing stuff down. But people liked them a lot. And it was a good way to debut this without actually having people in the building, because I had been chewing on it and turning it around and working on it, and then just wanted to get it to the people who
Right.
weren't allowed to
yeah.
come inside.
Well,
So that was the way.
Good, especially for people that are so brand new, it's a good introduction, and they can
Mhm.
see it, and they're not so stuck on the other forums that they're looking at that going, this is not a tree.
It's
Go ahead,
pretty
Mary.
intuitive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I put my name there, and then you can kind of figure out where to go.
It's a familiar shape too. Like you think about ripples in a pond or think about tree rings. It makes sense to think about that movement in the same way. So when we did have some virtual programs where I would share it again, people responded well to thinking about it like that. Whereas it's still kind of a tree, it's just a stump instead of the growing part.
Oh, there you go. There you go. I like that. It's a stump.
It's a tree we cut down.
Well, a lot of our family trees have seen some chainsawing.
Oh gosh, that's too funny. You talk a lot about, and you talked a lot that day about inclusion. Do you have any other thoughts or about along those lines of how we can be more inclusive as we, begin and our genealogy journey, as we, whatever we might be doing, writing, researching, giving talks, whatever it might be, the library's aspect of it, what are your thoughts?
Many. It's something that I think matters. And it's something that I think is hard about something that is based in the past, when inclusion is something we are currently working more on in the present. So if we are still working on it, they didn't have it right in the past if we don't have it right today. So as you keep moving further and further back, everybody knows where their blind spots are in their research. Sometimes it's hard to figure out what happened to the women in your family. It's hard to find out what happens to children in your families. It's hard to find out what happens to people of color in our families. And as we find those blind spots, I think even if it's a stump of a tree instead of a full one, the dead ends have just as much to teach us. And so there's nothing to say we shouldn't continue to explore them or move away a little bit from who am I related to and think about what would the experience of someone like my relative have been. I worked a lot in immigration history when I was living in New York, and we had a lot of folks who would come to our historic house because their family was a certain ethnicity that we were sharing. And a lot of folks who came like, well, I'm not Jewish at all. I'm not Irish at all. But there's still things to learn. There's still an experience that was had in this neighborhood of where they went to the restroom, where they went to grocery shop, the nearest public school. All of that is still relevant to the experience of an ancestor, even if it's not someone you can identify by name, which is the Holy Grail, of course, but isn't the only thing that teaches us things.
That's so true.
And like, did you work at the Tenement Museum? I love that place.
Yeah, I worked there for about 5 years. So they certainly inform a lot of my understanding of how I want to interpret history. The museum is a historic apartment building that was built in 1863 and was occupied till 1935 and was home to about 7,000 people in that time.
Wow.
Who came from about 25 different countries, I think. So there are a ton of different ethnicities that are represented in the programs that the museum offers. And folks come for all kinds of reasons. And we see all kinds of kids, which also certainly informs how I'm thinking about this now too. Yes. But yes, the Tenement is awesome. It was a really great place to work and definitely works on this same kind of challenge of how we tell these stories.
Yeah, I think I've done like 3 of the tours.
Good for you.
So,
getting that bingo card. That's what we used to call it. I was one of the people who gave the tours, so I was an educator there for about 5 years.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Does anybody else have a question about the chart or a question on inclusion and just things? I mean, yes, we've opened up that door. It's something new. What are some tips on what we can be doing? I mean, we're working every day on genealogy and educating people as everyone in this panel gives presentations and and encourages others as they begin learning. So what are some of your thoughts about how we can encourage people to be inclusive as they, you talked about learning about the fan club, as we hear about the social history, all those kinds of things. My thoughts are sometimes people will say things like, I was adopted. Okay, then that means this adopted family is not your family. You need to go and only research your biological family. Or for kids that just don't even know who their family is, or could be a whole host of different things that we need to be careful. So if you were going in to teach a class, maybe to kids, how would you, and I know we've talked about this on the panel before, how would you say to a child, we're going to create a family history? My child was just told, my adopted child was told she had to do a tree, but it had to be her bloodline.
Would be in the principal's office.
So it was taken care of. I promise you, it was taken care of. But yeah, I mean, I think that we just, we've got to be the first line of defense there and get in there and educate people. And so how would you come to a group of kids and how would you have them put together a tree?
Yeah, when I think about genealogy, and I come to this from a historian's perspective rather than having been working on genealogy my whole life. My great aunt Dot did all the genealogy in my family. And so when it came time for my ancestor project, my mom was like, here's the book, you can read it, have a good time. Like, it was not me doing the digging. So I cared very much about it. I loved it very much. And my family's always been super connected to our family abroad, but it was never like the passion project of the research for me, but history really was. And like, that's what kind of triggered that for me. But when I think about how to start that conversation, as you're kind of asking, I always think about genealogy as about studying connections. It's not necessarily about family, because as a person who does have an adopted grandparent, as you say, that's not my blood family. I don't know who his blood parents are. I might never know who they are. And so I have to kind of let go of the preciousness of a bloodline pretty early on when I start doing this work. And I think that's fine. I think that when we study genealogy, a lot of people are not looking to find their direct blood ties, and that's the research they care about. They're looking to see, what similarities they have with their ancestor from the Civil War, and they're looking to find the experiences that were had by people who lived 100 years ago that maybe could some way trickle down to who they are today. And I mean, I have been touched and raised by a whole bunch of other people that aren't my family. And, those people are connected to me and are part of my family network too. So I think when we start with inclusivity, thinking about not letting go of the family, but accepting that when you run into a bubble in your family tree, or when you have adoptive parents or adoptive grandparents, it's not the end of the story, because you also aren't necessarily, that's not what you care about so much. I care about the family unit. I don't know that I personally care as much about the biology, because I don't understand the biology, but I do understand the history and how to do the research. So that's what matters to me. And so when I go into a situation where I would talk to kids about it, talking about their genes and their DNA isn't as much fun as thinking about who are you connected to, who helps make you who you are, how does that change as we move further and further away from you, how does someone who maybe you never got to meet, how do they have an impact on your grandmother, how do they have an impact on your mom? Those kinds of questions still totally matter, and they're still genealogy. So I don't think that takes anything away from the craft of doing genealogy or the hard work that goes into it.
Exactly. And I was just thinking, Dan, you're starting a genealogy club or after school program or something. And so
so I'm starting one at the high school that I work at, and we're a sort of suburban community, so we don't have the rich diversity that a lot of other schools in the area have, but we do have some. And so this has been a great conversation for me in terms of helping students understand the difference between biological family and social family. And for most of us, that social family is much larger than sort of the narrowness of biological family. I know it is for me, that I have aunts and uncles and cousins that have no biological relation to me whatsoever, but are just as close as biological family, and I treat them as cousins and aunts and uncles and things like that, and they're just as important part of the family. But there's never been a place for me to include them in kind of a family tree, and so this kind of gives me the opportunity to insert those sort of bonus aunts and uncles that I got from my parents having really good friends. So
yeah, and I think I really like the library as the entrance point into genealogy versus some of the societies, because with the societies comes the baggage of lineage societies, etc. And I know in my family, because there are a lot of adoptions, there's hesitancy, because if I could join the DAR, but my cousin can't, and her 4 sisters can, we don't know what to do about that. That's something we wrestle with. And I think as librarians, you look at the general demographics more, and the educational side of it, and trying to think of the word, the enrichment of it. So it does give you, because I know when I first started too, I was intimidated by, you have to do this and you have to do that. And I personally, I'm all about the story. So I love how you could do that with stories, or do that with, like you said, context. Because let's face it, there are kids that aren't going to know the exact lives of their great-great-grandparents.
For sure.
But they might know they came from this small town in Russia. So you can get to, okay, what was life like for that generation in that small town?
For sure. And that still has value. And so it's okay if there's no concrete answer.
If there's not a name attached to it, yeah. So I think that would bring more people to family history. And I think then it becomes, some people think the word family, I don't know what y'all think. Some people think the word family history is more open. I always thought they were synonyms. What do y'all think?
Genealogy versus family history. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. When you say family history, you think, the lines in the tree, but you think more of the stories of the other people involved, and not just that one straight line. I mean, to me, that's what I think. When I just hear the word genealogy, I'm thinking mom, dad, grandparents, great grandparents, and up the line. So I don't know, Mary, what do you think? I'm sorry, Dan.
Go ahead, Mary.
You also don't get people thinking that you're a geologist or a gynecologist.
Good point. Good point.
I do think that family history is probably more approachable than genealogy.
That's the word. That's a good word.
Yeah.
And I think, it is so, the biology is a momentary chemical reaction. But the day-to-day living and the values that are imparted to the next generation because of the experiences of somebody who was forced to leave a country in famine or in war, and how that impacted their future decisions and how they chose to live and what they valued. It makes so much more impact than the people in that household.
Oh, I agree with you.
Than a momentary chemical reaction.
Yep, I agree with you. Dan, what were you going to say?
Well, first, let me just say, Mary, you are a hopeless romantic. It's a momentary chemical reaction. It's like, wow. It's like, woo, it's romantics. Woo. Me up in here. All right.
5 minutes later, you might have been a girl, Dan,
That's true. That's true.
Uh-oh, I think Cheri's in the floor.
All right, y'all, you're out of control tonight.
All right. So so my 2 cents on the family history genealogy. I think that the denotational definitions are virtually identical, right? I mean, it denotes the same thing, but I think the connotation is what's different. And genealogist implies, you know, sort of something a bit more sterile than family history, which is far more inclusive. But I wanted to circle back to something that Laura had mentioned, and that's an entry point. And I think libraries and museums are really much better equipped than a lot of genealogical societies to help younger people get that entry point into family history, because, you know, most genealogical societies, if you know, if a 15-year-old showed up, would look at that 15-year-old with you know, some type of suspicion. They'd clutch their purses a little closer. You know, what is this little hellion doing here? You know, and why he's clearly come to steal my purse. Not, oh, wonderful, he's interested in family history. You know, or if a 20-year-old single mom came in with a baby that wanted to learn more on how to research her family history, a lot of genealogical societies would not be equipped for that, and they might make that mom feel uncomfortable. Whereas libraries and museums and other things that are sort of cognates to what we do in genealogy really are a much more welcoming entry point, and that's a, you know, something that genealogical societies could work on, you know, and improve on a little bit, and is in terms of inviting and involving younger people, where libraries are vastly far ahead of genealogical societies in that respect.
Yeah, and libraries just kind of make it easy because they're civic staples in that way. You know, if you grow up going to a library or walking past a library, you know it exists, you know what's in there, you have a sense of how to use it. Your school probably had one. You know, my school did not have a DAR chapter. You know, I was not equipped to go into that in that experience. So in that sense, they are very natural entry points too. It has, I think, even less to do with what our resources are, though we work on them a lot to make sure that we can accommodate a ton of different needs at the library, regardless of what they might be. But the civic place for a library and for a museum are both incredible honors and incredible things to be stewards of, because if we're going to have that civic place and the city is going to pay my salary, then we're going to serve those folks that we're there to serve. So yeah, I think they're good entry points because they are so familiar as well. And that's something that we push against too with our particular building. I mean, it was built in the 1910s. It's a whole city block long. Like, it's a really gorgeous building, but it doesn't feel like your neighborhood public library does. And so finding that folks will find their way in there and feel okay to be in there. And you know, we have reading rooms that are modeled after the Vatican and feeling that they belong in those spaces is something else that's, you know, in no way under my control, but what I can control can help make that comfort level rise a little bit. Inclusion is not just about the chart.
Right.
A lot of things that are a piece of that.
Right. I mean, I think at the heart of it, inclusion is you want to include people. It's not a feather in your hat that you had a 15-year-old come to your genealogical society. It is, you want young people to come to your genealogical society because they bring some fresh ideas. Or, you know, because I've seen nonprofits, it wasn't gen societies, but like, we need younger members, we need leadership for the future. And I'm like, if all you're going to offer the new members is you guys get to lead, they're not going to want to come.
For sure.
Or so you run our Zoom meeting for us because we need different technology.
Well, although then you're giving them like, oh, you're contributing. I think that was one of the points that Dan had made is, you know, finding a point that they feel like they can contribute rather than, okay, I'm just sitting here not understanding 90% of what's going on, feeling lost. So, so I really love I think that's part of what you're doing is your heart was all about inclusion. And that's what led you to the new idea,
Mm-hmm.
because you wanted that to happen.
Yes.
You're not ticking a box, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yes, I agree with your assessment of my thought. Yes, I think that's exactly where I was. And was also probably influenced by the pandemic and not having anyone in the building and thinking about what can I do to get warm bodies in here once I can? What's going to make it feel good and safe, and like you aren't already starting from zero because you aren't sure that you can track out both of your parents the right way.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, there you go. Exactly.
Yeah, want to make sure that everything feels accessible and easy and can just step right into it.
That's wonderful. You know, I think sometimes, especially when people are getting, they're starting out, they're looking for classes, or they're looking for that genealogy society, which we want them, you know, to go to. But I think people forget that they can call their local library and find out what they've got going on there. They could have classes, or most of them will have somebody in charge of the history of that county, of that place, and be able to,
especially for genealogy, you know, all those records from all those churches and all those graveyards have to go somewhere. So even if you have a small community, you know, I'm in a medium-sized city, but and we have a ton of options, but even if you're in little county seats, there's nothing to say you don't have resources available.
Exactly. So don't forget about your libraries, because they can just be a wealth of information. And, you know, if you call your library and they don't have anything, suggest that they do as far as learning.
Get it together.
Class. Ask them, you know, would you be willing to let us have a genealogy club in the library? Would you, could we do some classes? Is there anybody in the community that could come in and teach classes, that type of thing? So there's nothing wrong with calling your library. And if they aren't doing, maybe they don't know that their community would like that type of thing. And yeah, especially the smaller ones that have less money. Mary?
I find, I mean, and I'm in a bigger-ish city in Seattle, but our libraries, I mean, they're funded through tax dollars. They have budgets that they need to spend on education.
Exactly.
And so it's actually, you know, in many ways better than a genealogy society that's relying on dues and to pay their rent. So there's options there, and our local libraries offer some pretty good programming.
That's great. That is good.
Our local library, once they figured out that most of the cemeteries were already fully on Find a Grave, they started going, they're like, but we have some census records here. We should match those up. Cool. So they went and then started annotating on Find a Grave, like, you can find records here at our library.
Wow, that's great.
So, I mean,
I like that.
Well, I'm sure you know this, Mary Kate. You're always going to find some librarians that are just going to go far beyond what's. I'm not suggesting that's the duty of every librarian, but they really are interested in your local history.
And interested in serving the public. You know, the librarians are public servants. So people who want to be in the career that are libraries are doing that work. They want to serve their public. And so many people are so excited to be like, there's something else you want and you think we can do it? Let's try. You know, it's very it's very exciting at a public library when someone brings you a new idea, particularly from the public.
Well, we have appreciated having you on tonight. Does anybody have any last questions or comments before we go?
No, just come back, Mary Kate. Next time you have another idea, come back. We like hanging out with you.
Agreed. This has been a great part of my evening.
We're so
Next time I have an idea, I'll be the first to know.
Yeah, please do. And we will hopefully get a picture of your chart so we can put it up.
Oh, yeah, I can email that to you.
Yeah, that would be great. And then, it's wonderful. Thank you for coming and sharing that with us. I love being able to, share anything new that's out there. So this was fabulous, and we enjoyed your presentation at SLAM.
Thank you so
and congratulations for.
Thank you.
Anyway, I guess with that, Thank you again, and thanks to my panel, and we will see you next time on GenFriends. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.